Hello there, fearfully and wonderfully made human. It's me, Diana, from Through the Valley Therapy and Transformed Mind Consulting and Coaching. And today, I have a guest whose journey is one you won't want to miss. David Shapiro first reached out to me through Christian Care Connect from the American Association of Christian Counselors, telling me about his new podcast, The Boundless Bible. And of course, me being who I am, I immediately went into research mode. I listened to the trailer, then the first episode, and thought, hey, why not? These guys sound interesting. But what really pulled me in was David's story. I mean, an MMA fighter, Army veteran, and former atheist who finds Jesus. That's a conversation I knew I wanted to have. David was born in New York City to an Orthodox Jewish family, but over time he struggled with faith, eventually becoming an atheist. He spent years chasing the next thrill, serving in the military, becoming a professional fighter, and pushing himself to the limits. But instead of fulfillment, he found emptiness. Then one day, he felt an urge to check out a local church, and that moment changed everything. Since then, David has dedicated his life to understanding the faith he once rejected. He earned a bachelor's in biblical studies with a concentration in Christian counseling, a master's in biblical archaeology, and now an ordained pastor and chaplain. He currently serves as a chaplain for the City of Hollywood Fire Department and co-hosts the Boundless Bible Podcast. David, I'm so excited that you are here. Welcome to the Holistic Counselor Podcast.
Thank you so much, Dana. Wow, it sounds a lot better coming out of your mouth than it was when people ask me about myself. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So before we start, I want to know, Hollywood, California?
Nope, Hollywood, Florida.
Oh, you're here?
I am here.
I didn't know you were in Florida.
Yeah, I am in Hollywood, Florida.
Wow. Okay. So that's a hop, skip, and a jump away from me. I'm in Deerfield Beach.
There you go. Pembroke Pines is where I live.
Okay.
So
all right.
Very close.
All right. See, I guess I didn't research enough. All right. So tell me about this journey from growing up in an Orthodox Jewish home to becoming an atheist and then discovering Christ is extraordinary. Can you walk us through this?
Absolutely. So, growing up, I was an Orthodox Jewish household. I didn't really know anything else in life. I grew up in shul and temple. I went to Hebrew school. My grandparents took me to all the religious holidays to their temple. It's just what life was. But I never really understood a lot of what I was learning. I understood what they said it was, but it was very much tradition, and it was saying the same things and reading the same things, and nothing really connected me to what I was learning. And I was also not the greatest kid. A quick story, I didn't want to go to Hebrew school, so I wrote a note saying that the Hebrew school was closed, and I put it on the door, so I didn't have to go that day. So I wasn't the most ideal student to begin with, but I just never felt that connection. And I just felt as if this is what it is and I'm following God and it's supposed to have this feeling that everybody around me felt, and I didn't, that just God didn't exist. There was something that they were following that I didn't understand. And I kind of started to move away from the religion and really taking on some of the school studies as, hey, look, science is completely opposite of what this is saying in the Torah. And I don't really believe that this is, I can believe something written 4,000 years ago. I'm going to believe in something written 40 days ago from scientists. And that's kind of began my journey of becoming an atheist. And I just moved away from the religion.
Wow. And for how long? Because this is something I see a lot, and even in my own family with some. I wasn't raised I was raised Catholic and then a little bit of Santeria. And so that's, and then I was atheist, New Age and everything until later on. But when did this started happening? How old were you when you started questioning that? And then you were like, yeah, this is BS. You know what I mean? Like,
I was a young boy when I started to question it. I was 16 when I really walked away. When I said, "No, this is not it." I was 16 years old, and
mhm.
I really didn't come back until about my mid 30s. So it was about 20 years that I stepped away.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned that once believing that science and faith are at odds, like that's what I'm getting. Like, you started listening to science and then, it makes some sense. Some of it does. Like I remember learning all that. Um, and now that you see them as complementary, like they can coexist. So what was the turning point for you and how do you reconcile that?
I don't think it was a turning point as far as something I learned. I think once I accepted Jesus, and that's a story we'll talk about in a little bit. I think I just started to look at the science and doing research on, what science really is and what it explains. And I think that people put a lot of weight on it. Meanwhile,
Hmm.
a lot of what we hear is theory. And another funny story, I looked at, the movie Jurassic Park and growing up, in the 70s and 80s, dinosaurs were lizards. They were big lizards, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden they became birds. I'm like, what do you mean they're birds? And
Right.
it didn't make a lot of sense to me. And I started looking at other sciences, and I go, these are all theories. There are laws, but what I was holding my belief in were
Mhm.
theories of science and not proven fact.
Wow.
And I started to really research that and research the biblical accounts. And I realized just how much science, even though the Bible is not a science book, how
Hmm.
much science was in there was actually true. And there was no way they would have known that 4,000 years ago.
Yeah. So I want to touch that a little bit more because I love science and I do know quite a few people like those questions you're saying in that age. Because I worked with a lot of adolescents for
Yep.
most of my life. And that is like, and that's a hard part as well, because I think that's what's missing in the churches. They ignore science and say it's just this thing. And then when a lot of these teenagers go to colleges or even a public high school, for example, whatever.
Yep.
I mean, and then parents or pastors don't even know how to talk about this anymore. And they're like, no, this is just the way it is. You just have to trust God. It's kind of like
Yep.
spiritual bypassing. Like, how do you like what would you say to like a pastor or a parent or even the kid that's like questioning it?
One of the things I would say is just to kind of shock them with how much science really is in there. There are things in Levitical law that we look at and we go, well, this is, a law written a long time ago and it really holds no weight today. And,
Mhm.
you read something like when you're impure, you wash under running water. And we take that for granted, not realizing that people never did this. This wasn't something that was known, especially scientifically. In the 1800s, a Dr. Semmelweis was the first one when he was caring for maternity parents. I'm sorry, maternity mothers. A lot of them were being fell ill and died, and he couldn't figure out what was going on. And then he realized that what the doctors would do is do their rounds in the morning. They would
Mhm.
find all of the people that had passed throughout the night, so they'd be handling cadavers, and then they would go right into the maternity ward and handle these mothers. And what we found was, once you started washing under running water, washing away the bacteria, which they didn't know then, all of these women were being saved, and there weren't as many being killed. This is something that was written about in Levitical law. It's an amazing thing. Something you mentioned earlier is, and on your path, when you kind of get into almost a metaphysical world, I think people look at that and they go, okay, metaphysical world, it holds no bearing. We're not supposed to hold crystals and pray to them. And I absolutely understand that. But when you look again, metaphysical properties with the ancient law, one
Mhm.
of the things that they talk about with God is you're not allowed to wear cotton and linen at the same time. And you go, well, where does that come from? Why does that make sense? Well, what they've discovered is there are actual energies in fabric. And when you look at the energies and the waves in fabric, when you have a positive amount, it does beneficial things to your body. You feel more awake, you feel more alive, you're moving around, being more productive. When it's negative, you feel brought down and you feel negative and more tired. Well, linen and cotton separately are one of the best fabrics. They have a huge amount and they put off this great positive energy to you. But when you wear them both together, they cancel each other out, believe it or not, and it becomes a negative. So when you look at the law, you go, there's no way they would have known that.
Hmm.
4,000 years ago when Levitical law was written at. So you start to realize that science is proving things that were already there. So when I talk to people, I want to show them this amazing world of there are mountains under the sea. We didn't know that. There was no snorkeling gear back then. There are as
Right.
many, stars in the heaven as there are people in the population. And you realize, well, there really are billions of people and billions of stars. And just all the different things that are in the Bible scientifically can be proven. So it just opened my entire world for that.
Wow. I can't believe you're talking about the cotton and linen thing because honestly, and this is so, I felt and it's not like I'm on social media a lot or I'm so busy, right? But there was something in me going, you know what? I'm going to get rid of all my clothes right now and I'm going to want to go pure. I don't know why. And it was like the five things: cotton, linen, wool,
Yep.
cashmere. And I think those are it. There might be one more, but you see, and it was weird. And I'm like, I don't know. Then my girlfriend, one of my best friends came into town and we're talking and we're thrifting. We have not talked about that. And she goes, and she's a strong Christian woman. And she's like, I don't know, there's something in, and she said, there's something in me right now. And I'm getting rid of all. And I'm like, what? MB, are you
Yeah.
kidding me? And I don't know why that's happening right now, but you're bringing Dave. Listen, people, I've not never met David. I have no idea who he really is. I just saw him on the internet. He contacted me. I liked what he said on his Boundless Bible with the other guys. And then boom, he's talking about this. That's no coincidence.
No,
Okay. None at all. So now I just want to go into that rabbit hole with you with the, with the cotton.
there are a lot of rabbit holes to jump into. Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So listen, that's the thing. It's like understanding, like how would you challenge someone to start learning about the science? Because people, you know what I realize, like so many people are scared of the word science, especially with what happened in the last, few years and stuff like that. It's like, follow the science. And, I'm not going to get into that debate, but I do understand that, there's double blind studies, there's like real science where people really, and it's about questioning. That's where I started getting like, wait, what do you mean I'm not following the science? I'm questioning things. That's what science is about.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
It's supposed to be what it's about. The problem is that, and this is with anything, it's with religion as well.
mhm,
People build upon other people's thoughts. So you have science, and no science is new. It's built upon what other scientists thought about and what they discovered. And you might have a scientist that is atheist in their views. They don't believe in God. So they are going to explain away what they discovered in a way that doesn't share the glory with God.
mhm,
And then somebody's going to take that and they're going to run with it. And now we have this debate going back and forth on where creation came from, evolution, the Big Bang Theory. You have all these different conflicts where you go, well, science is saying this and religion is saying this other thing. And what you realize is science is giving theory, not fact.
mhm,
And religion is reading from a book that they believe is inerrant in the word of God, but atheists do not. So you
mhm,
have this controversy on both sides, and you have to go with, for me, what feels right in your heart. And for me, the one thing I'll say is, aside from the overwhelming proof scientifically, I believe in God, every one of us has a story inside of us. Every
mhm,
one of us has this testimony that is inside of us that can't be explained by science, that's just there. We all go through this life and it's not for no purpose. It's not just happenstance. We're not just randomness. There's a reason for it. And if you want to believe in randomness, you're more than welcome to. I'm not going to convince you otherwise, but I know there's a story inside you also. And as soon as you open your eyes to it, I think you realize that both work hand in hand. Science is what God uses. He uses math and science to create everything. Whether you look at the fine tuning argument, how everything has this fine tuning in this world, any little thing that was off would cause massive destruction. If the gravity is off, if the moon is a little bit closer, the moon is a little bit further, there's this fine tuning that happens. It's undeniable. And whether you want to believe in randomness or a higher power, I
mhm.
think that if you really search what's going on in your brain, it's it's there. I don't think people are afraid of God or the name God or following God. I think they are more questioning, well, what does that mean? Does that mean I have to admit that I'm sinful? Do I have to change the way that I live? I don't want somebody else to be in control.
Mhm.
Anxiety is all about control. I think people want to have control, and I understand that. And to give up control to a God is
Mm.
very challenging for people, but I think it's in there. We say all the time, there's no atheist in an emergency room. Somebody is in an emergency room. What do you do? Please God, let my loved one be okay.
Yeah.
Because I think everybody truly wants, at moments like that, some higher power to just take away all the pain.
Yes.
So I think that's kind of the conversation I would have with people.
Wow. Yeah, that was spot on. Like anxiety is a form of control, because I mean, you know what I do for a living, right? So I sit with people with their anxiety. It is teaching them how to surrender into the faith, right? It's going from the flesh, right? And the ego
Mhm.
into the humility and the surrender and realizing like there is something out there that we cannot put in a box
Yep.
and sit there and say this is just how it is, this narrow way of thinking, because we do that to soothe ourselves. And to me, like, that's the awe of being a believer. That's how I see it. Like, we know, I mean, I know, like, when I look at nature, even the tiniest little ladybug, I'm like, Lord, that is your creation.
Yeah,
You made that. That, like, everything that you make is perfect.
absolutely.
It's perfect. So, listen, you're a former MMA fighter, and I just want to let you know that I have my husband and two sons that I don't understand it. I don't want a part of it. I mean, my husband's like, "Come on, come watch it." I'm like, "No, that's not my thing. I don't get it." I gotta say that there's something about it that I see that's just very, I don't want to say testosterone or not, because there's females fighting too. But what is it like? You're, and a martial arts instructor, and you trained your body and mind for battle. Man,
Yep.
like that's the physical, that's the flesh, right? And now you know how to train people for the spiritual, which is amazing to me. That's all together. But how do you think your martial arts training prepared you physically and mentally for your walk with Christ?
It's all discipline. So my entrance into the martial arts world was because I actually started off because I was picked on as a little kid, and my mom sent me to martial arts classes, and I just began to uh, really excel. I loved it. I excelled at it. And when you excel at something, you want to do it more and more because it makes you feel good.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like that journey led me into the ring. It wasn't something I planned on. It wasn't something that I was like, yeah, this is what I want to be when I grow up. It was something I landed into because I was just good at it. And I continued to follow the advice of other instructors. And it was really just the discipline of, if this is what I need to do in order to be successful here, then I'll do
Mhm.
it.
Okay.
With my walk with Christ, he is my instructor. I'm just following his lead. I'm not sure where he's leading me, but I trust him as the expert to lead me where I need to be. I just need to be disciplined enough to follow that in a way that would make him proud. And I think that loving him and learning more about him makes him proud.
Mhm.
Same reason why training my body in a way where I was going to be able to defeat another opponent made my coach at that time proud. And to me, there was no difference. I didn't dislike anybody that I fought. On the contrary, I thought they were all great people. It was
Mhm.
just a job to do. Where here, I'm not following a religion for the religious aspect. I'm following a God. I'm following Christ, who had done so much for me. It's not
Mhm.
about religion. It's about Christ. So if somebody says,
Wow.
hey, you shouldn't follow religion, I'm like, you're absolutely right. Don't follow the religion. Follow the person who's in at the head of that religion. And to me, that's Christ.
Amen. Amen. So I'm still interested in the MMA thing
Sure.
because like I'm still what kind of mixed martial arts did you do? Was it
So I
jujitsu
started
or
off in Muay Thai, which is a stand-up version of
Ah.
kickboxing where you use your elbows and your knees.
Uh-huh.
And it's a Thai style of kickboxing. I did that, and I actually practiced kung fu as well, a traditional style of kung fu, for probably about 20 years. And from the Muay Thai, which I fought for most of my career, I met a guy who did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I got involved with that. And then my last couple of fights was in the MMA ring. My last fight was at the Tropicana Hotel in Atlantic City, great venue, big fight.
Uh-huh.
It was something that I love doing,
Hmm.
and I love even more retiring from now.
Yeah. So what, okay. Is it how long ago was this? You know why I'm asking? Because my husband's going to hear this and he's going to, he loves MMA so much, or, especially UFC. And so, so it's just like, is there anybody that you fought that he might know?
My last fight was probably about 12 years ago.
Okay.
Um, the people that I trained with,
Hmm.
Tom Don McCrory, which is the Barnyard Cat, John Doyle. John Doyle actually fought a gentleman who, in the other side of the ring, your husband will know him, Anderson Silva and Nogueira was this guy's coach
Okay.
across the ring. So John Doyle was my fighter who fought under me. So there were Brian Vittel, who fought for the IFL, was one of my good friends. So there were definitely people in the arena that you would have known. Matt Serra was in the locker rooms of one of my fights.
Mhm.
So definitely people that he would recognize.
Yeah.
For me, it was just, again, these were just ordinary people who
Right.
we're other fighters, and you get to know it's funny because church is a big world, but it's very small. A lot of pastors know each other. I have to imagine it's going to be the same thing in Christian counseling. There's a lot, but it's a small world. And the same thing with fighters. There's so many fighters, but you really start to know all of them, and they really are great people. I enjoyed my
Yeah.
time with all of them.
That's so cool. All right, honey, that was for you. That was for you. All right, so I know like in something I read about tattoos, right? And you said that it was a way to mask insecurities.
Yes.
What role did faith play in helping you uncover and address those deeper emotional wounds?
That one took a lot longer. And that's also how I became a Christian to begin with. So I had used tattooing, as you said, to cover up my body. I was not happy with me. I had self-esteem issues. So I have about 40 or 45 tattoos covering a lot of my body. And
Okay.
I kept getting them, and it was masking hurt and insecurities. And a lot of it stemmed from my childhood, and specifically childhood with my father, who had caused quite a bit of trauma.
Mm.
And I remember going to my first sermon ever. I walked into a church for the first time, and the pastor was talking about a heavenly father who loved you.
Mm.
And I just had this moment of, there's a father who loves me. And it just paused everything. And I didn't hear anything else in the sermon. I just kept replaying that in my mind. And it was, wow, there's a father who loves me. And from there, I started learning about who I am in the eyes of God.
Mm.
And I realized that I don't have to be ashamed. I don't have to worry about my self-esteem. I don't have to spend my entire life trying not to be like the man who I was terrified of. I can just be the man that God made me.
Mm.
And it began to take all of that weight off of me. And it was no longer about seeing the tattoo. It was, no, I want people to see me. I'm made in God's image, and it's the most wonderful thing ever. And I'm proud of, my Heavenly Father. And I've even been able, and this took a long time, I was able to forgive my father,
Yeah,
my earthly father. And that took a long time.
it
But I've
does.
been able to do that.
Yeah, I mean I want to just touch on that a little bit because that's something that I see. It's like, forgiveness, sometimes it's like we get stuck in the what they did, what they did, what they did, what they did, what they did. And yeah, I mean, listen, I sit and validate those feelings with my clients. Like, yeah, like it stinks that dad did so and so, or mom didn't do so and so, or auntie or grandpa or whatever family or neighborhood or teacher or whatever it is. It's like, I mean, processing it, like how did you process it? What tools did you utilize? Because like you're going into you have a concentration in Christian counseling, right? So you kind of get what I do, right? And you're a pastor. Yeah, right? So like to me, like are there any specific tools that you've utilized or have the understanding or even Bible verses, anything for my client that's sitting there listening to this right now in that desperation? It's like, I can't forgive them. I can't forgive them. Like, how can you and I help expedite that in a way? Because you look back and say, I spent all that time hating or being bitter or being resentful, and I want to help the next generation to, like, hey, let's not waste time in that victim. Let's move into now, yeah, it happened, the radical acceptance. Like, what would you say?
Oh, I went through the gamut of things. So the first thing I went to is, well, the Bible. You don't forgive a few times, you forgive 70 times, 7 times. And that's what he says. I'm going, well, it's impossible. There's no way I don't forgive once, let alone forgive 490 times. And then I realized, well, that's just a symbolism for perfection. You're supposed to forgive indefinitely. I'm going, wow, I don't know if I can do that. And then I moved to where people were saying, well, forgiveness is for you, not for them.
Hmm.
You're holding this in your heart, and this is poison for you, and you have to let it go. And I'm going, no, that's not working either, because the pain I'm feeling from what he did is overshadowing that. And I wanted, I don't even know what I wanted. If it was closure, forgiveness, I wanted something that I wasn't getting.
Right.
And then I started thinking about Jesus, and everyone goes, well, look at what Jesus did and look at what he went through. And he's going through this agonizing torture and beating and crucifixion. And he's asking God to forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I used to make a joke. I'm like, well, I know I'm not Jesus because I don't forgive. And so I literally ran the gamut. I'm like, nothing is working. I cannot forgive this man. And then I started thinking about the anxiety and the control. And I'm going, I have all this anxiety. I have this issue with covering up my body with tattoos. I have all these things that I lived with, trying to control the outcome. Meanwhile, I have given complete control to my father and not even thought about that. I never thought about giving him the control over this. I said, I want to take this control back. I just don't want to give it to him. I don't trust him with me and my feelings, so I'm sure not going to trust him with the control over my life and my mind. And that started, it didn't erase it. It just started the healing process of me going, if I take this away from him, if I don't leave the healing part up to him, he is never going to give me what I need. At this point, I don't even know what it is, because it's been 35 years since he's done what he's done.
Mm-hmm.
I just need to start trusting that God does have me in his hands. I can move forward. And I can also be a better person by changing my story. God has given us free will, and I can change my story. And I looked at it and I go, how do I give back to people? God did this for a reason. And I go, okay, maybe he made me, go through what I went through so I can be really tough and get in a ring and no one's going to hurt me. And I was like, no, that doesn't feel right. Well, maybe he did it so I can be in the military and go through Ranger training and make it through. I'm like, no, that wasn't it. And then one day I was like, maybe he did this so I can connect with other people who have gone through similar issues and just tell them, you're loved. That's it. You might not have been loved by that person in the way that you should have. It's not your fault. I was 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old when this was all taking place. It's not my fault. But I didn't know that then, because I didn't know what life was back then. And the person who I trusted me to teach life did that too. I put my trust now in God, and I put my trust now in the fact that I can use that to help other people. And God created us really beautifully, because when you help somebody, you always feel good. It's how he created us. And I realized that once you start to help people, man, you just feel great about it. And now you have a purpose for why you went through that pain, and it's to help somebody.
That's right. I mean, and it doesn't mean like you have to help, like become a therapist
Sure.
or write a book or whatever. It is understanding. First of all, you have to understand your own story and who Jesus is. That's
Yep.
the identity part. That is the identity. I start with a lot of my clients with Psalm 139.
Yep.
It's just like understanding that, and then letting go bit by bit the situations that have caused all this emotional pain and physical pain. Because as a holistic therapist, I understand sometimes you're holding on to the emotion so tight and now you have a gut problem. And You see, and then sometimes it's like I don't want to do anything with the Bible and because I don't feel him and it's all about feelings and feelings to me it's important because that's what protects you, right? It's like
Yeah.
your brain is telling you that I don't feel right. Yeah, I want you to go, but it's learning to balance all of that.
Yes.
And and then it's the intention of your heart. You said something about being in the military. I just want to go in there for a little bit. Like, it's a significant part of your story. Can you tell me, like, when did you go in? What branch? How long? Tell me about your.
I was September 11th happened, and I was like millions of people. Hey, I'm going in, and I'm protecting this country. And I was enlisted into the army, and said, hey, if I'm going to go in, I want to be with the best. And my mother was terrified at this point. She really didn't want me to go.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm going to go and I'm going to be with the best. I enlisted with the Airborne Rangers, the 82nd Airborne Rangers. And I went in and I was ready to go overseas and serve and do what I needed to do for this country. And I was all gung ho and ready for it. And what's interesting is it's the second time that God has actually called out to me. The first time was when I was a kid,
Hmm.
where Jesus specifically called out to me, and not audibly with his voice, but as a kid, I always wore the chain of the Star of David, and I saw people wearing the cross, and I just thought it looked cooler when I was a kid. I'm like, man, that's really cool. And it was the first time I felt like he called out to me. And then when I went into the military, like anybody else, you get nervous, you get scared, you're going through some extreme things. And I want to be the alpha male and say it was easy, and but there were moments I was scared. And I tried to go back to Hebrew studies, and it did nothing for me. I ended up going to church in the army, and their church services made me feel better. And I
Wow.
still didn't accept Christ at that point, but just I felt more protected and I felt more connected. And it was a second time that I felt like Jesus really called out to me, like, hey, there's something here.
Hmm.
Um, but from there, I was bitter at the time, but really blessed now that I was not sent overseas. A lot of people that I served with were sent overseas, and I was bitter because these were my brothers, and I wanted to go with them. And the military chose that I should stay back and work on teaching self defense. At that time, it was becoming the combatives.
Hmm.
So I was going to work on combatives, and ended up getting hurt my shoulder, and ended my career in less than 2 years.
Okay.
So it was a very quick time, but man, was it impactful,
Yeah.
and something that I am very honored to have been a part of,
Mhm.
but also very saddened and bitter because I see so many people that I feel really deserve an honor for serving the military in a way that I just wasn't able to, didn't have the ability at that time, didn't have the I didn't have the permission to serve in the way that I wanted to serve. And
Mm.
that was something where, so Veterans Day comes, and to my wife, I'm very much like, no, don't celebrate me, celebrate everyone else.
Mm.
Let's celebrate all the ones who are real heroes. And she tries to remind me of that I served, and I enlisted and all
Yes.
that. I get it, and I know it. But that, to me, I'm okay with that feeling. I know a lot of people that I love dearly, that have given their life to this country, and
Right.
those are the guys who and women who I will honor a million times before myself.
Yeah. But you know what though? It's kind of like you did it. You went in and you tried and it's like this is part of your story.
Yeah,
This is what
oh,
God has
100%.
used to be part of your story. And I still think, well, I'm still going to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Because it doesn't, you went in, you had the want to come and it's not protecting just you. When what I've come to find out with those that I've talked to in the military, they go in, they want to protect the country. They also want to get away from maybe some of the traumatic experiences because I worked at alternative high school. So, some of them enlist. That's their way. That's like, no, they'll pay for my college. They'll do this. They'll do that.
Yep.
But then, they have to learn that no, this is about the collective of the country.
Yes.
And you did that. So thank you. And yeah, I mean, you better be standing up on Veterans Day. Or, so listen, reading the Bible 3 times in a month is no small feat. This is what you told me, right? And I'm like, wait, what? What insights did you gain during that time that still resonate with you today? And what would
Oh
you
boy.
say with someone that's just picking up the Bible for the first time? Because it's overwhelming. Because sometimes, honestly, I've been walking with the Lord since 2000, and I've read the Bible. I've done Bible studies. I pray. I'll read here and there. But last year is the first year that I've ever truly read it from beginning to end. And that is overwhelming, especially when you get through like Numbers or Kings and you're like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Yep.
So tell me about it.
I, again, it was my story. So for me, picture if you saw the first four Harry Potters and you never saw any of the other ones, and you saw it over and over and over again, and then finally somebody gave you the last few. You would be like, man, I need to know how this ends. That was me as a Jewish boy. I read the Torah and I
Okay.
read the Old Testament over and over and over for years, and I
That's
knew it.
true.
And then all of a sudden it was, here's the ending. And I was believing it and all in. And I was like, I need to read that. And then I need to read it again to now connect my old faith with my new faith. And then I read it a third time to understand those moments where you're going, wait a minute, I have no idea. I had no idea that this pointed to Jesus. I had no idea that this is what this story was about. So for me, it was the excitement of connecting A and Z. And it was, listen, if you asked me to read it 3 times now in a month, there's no way. It
Yeah.
was then. Now it would be absolutely impossible. But for the moment, my emotions and my adrenaline were just at an all-time high. And I was like, I need to know how this ends. And I need to understand this.
Yeah. So, what would you say to someone that might be Jewish or like that kid that is like, okay, I'm learning it and and I've interviewed or know of Muslims too. They know their
Yep.
book. I mean,
Yep.
I had a great conversation with a Muslim young man one day, and he said, "What's sad about Americans, especially the Christians, is that they don't know their book." And then he literally gave me his Quran, and it was English and oh my gosh, I just forgot the language. Sorry, guys.
Arabic.
Yeah. And then he's just like, point anywhere and I'll know it. And so I did, and he knew it. And then I would do it again and I do it again. I'm like, oh my, and then he challenged me. He did.
Yep.
He's like, you guys are biblically, you believe in this religion, but you don't know the words. And I'm like, ooh, that was so convicting. So tell me what you would say to someone for that, for the Bible, like understanding.
Well, just because this came up with this boy, I would have said the devil knows our book better than anybody. It doesn't make him a believer. So knowing it isn't as powerful as understanding it and having faith in it.
Wow.
So it's one thing to know it, and there are people that know this. I have professors that I know that I am blown away by the amount of knowledge they have, but
Mhm.
they don't have the faith that a Christian should have. So that's the first thing is if you read it as a book to try to memorize it or understand it the first time out, there's no way it's going to happen. But if you have faith that the things that are going to jump out at you are there for a reason,
Mhm.
then you're doing okay. Don't, when you go through the genealogies and you're saying, well, this is awful and this is boring. And, you go, I don't understand this. That's okay. And if you want to skip it for now, skip it. Nobody is, standing behind you as a teacher going, wait, you skip that, you're in trouble. There's going to be a test on all the genealogy. It doesn't matter. That will come. But if you have the belief and faith in what you're reading, those words will pop out and you're going to read these stories and go, this touches me in a completely different way. And then when you do it again and again at all different ages, and this is why it's the living word, it
Mhm.
speaks to you differently every single time.
Yes.
What I wouldn't recommend, and sometimes people do it, is they kind of go eeny, meeny, miny, mo. They open it up, they pick out a section and they read it. The problem with that is you're now reading it out of context and you're pulling words to match whatever your opinion is at that moment.
Mm.
And the Bible's there to stretch you, not to agree with you. So if you're reading it out of context, it's very easy to go, oh, it says this. I always knew that. No, maybe you should read it again. It's probably trying to teach you something different. So I would definitely read it where you're reading it in context. You're reading an entire book at a time. You're not jumping around. You don't have to read it in order. There are some great websites that tell you which order they recommend you read it in first. They say you should read the New Testament so you learn about Jesus first. I think when you have faith, if you're just reading, if you're opening up and you're reading, you're doing a great job. The understanding, the memorizing, all that will come, but it doesn't matter because what's in your heart is really what counts. And if you're reading and your heart is saying, Jesus, I love you, it doesn't matter how many verses you know. You're a million times better than the professor that knows that entire book and gets nothing from it.
Yeah. So you named or you said that there's websites. Is there any like resources that have helped you in the beginning times of you becoming a Christian?
People, websites are rough because you never know who writes them and where their opinions come from.
Right.
What I have found, and I still do this to this day, there are some really popular people out there. One of my favorite people in the entire world, John Lennox, is just an absolute brilliant apologist. He's hard to understand unless you come from that world. He is a brilliant mathematician, I believe from Oxford, who's a believer. He's brilliant. But what I choose to do is go to people who are unusually successful in what they do. So I will go to preachers and listen to them from India. Why? Because there are places in India where you're not allowed to preach. So if you're preaching not knowing that you could be killed for that preaching, it just hits differently. It's a whole different level that you're getting. If I am going to listen to Old Testament, information, I might go to a rabbi still and talk to a rabbi who has quite a bit of knowledge and information. So I go to the University in Jerusalem and I'll talk to some of those professors. Now, I know that a lot of people aren't going to be jumping around and also might not have the open doors to have conversations with people from, all across the globe. But if you find somebody who has a love for the Lord and has some education behind them, and I don't mean education as far as they went to the best seminaries, but they did some learning. They're just not pulling out verses and saying whatever they want for their own personal gain. You're going to get something out of it. It's hard to point to a website. There are, William Lane Craig is amazing. And, you have some of these speakers that are so dynamic and so amazing, and you listen to them and you're instantly sucked into what they're saying. They are who I aspire to be because of not the information they have in their brain, but how they convey it to people. Those are the things that I look for when I try to understand something, because with, I don't know, a million pastors out there in the United States, you're getting a million different translations of the same passage. And this is one of the problems people have. They go, well, if this Bible is so clear, why do there a million people have a million different translations? And they would be right and wrong. They'd be right in the fact that, yes, there are a million translations. They'd be wrong because we're all different personalities also. We're meant to be different. So it's okay to read things differently because we're all different walks of life with different experiences. And, if you have somebody with anxiety who came from one part of the world and somebody with anxiety coming from the other, you can't treat them the same. They're individuals. You have to hear their story and know how to connect with them individually. And so I think people accept that for everything other than religion. When it's religion, it needs to be exactly the same for everyone. And that's just not how we're made.
Yeah, yeah. And so like how would you encourage someone that might be curious about Christianity? Like someone that might be listening that's like, all these other things are not working, but this Jesus, like why is there so much controversy? Why are there 1,000 billion different denominations of one? Why, and they're curious, or they have a lot of church hurt, because I do work with a lot of spiritual abuse, religious trauma, church hurt, spiritual bypassing. I could keep listing on and on and on. And that's causing the anxiety. That's causing the depression. And I, it's like, it's trying to get them to understand, like, yeah, these are the narratives and they made you feel a certain way, but how do we get our power back to able to like and not deconstruct, because that's the biggest movement I see right now is the
Yes.
deconstruction of faith. To me, it's like, okay, let's disentangle and reconstruct
Yep.
without losing your walk with Christ.
100%. If you are somebody who doesn't know Christ, never did, really want to know the story, I think that starting point is, yes, obviously reading the Bible, but then having a conversation with anybody, even a brand new pastor, will have something to teach you. We say all the time, a third grader can disciple a first grader because they are 2 grades ahead. So you don't need to get the top end mind. You don't need to go to a John Lennox when you're a brand new believer or somebody who is interested in learning. If you have the interest, you're already there. You're right there. You go, hey, I'm curious about this. Let me start opening up a conversation with friends, family, anybody who's just a little bit ahead of you. You're going to get some great knowledge from. And a lot of it has to do with testimony, not logic. If you're looking for logic, you're not looking for Christ. You're looking for the testimony, and you're looking for the heart, and you will find the logic in it over time. But if I start off with, this huge philosopher and what he says about it, I'm going to be more lost than if I just try to read the Bible. So if you're brand new, anybody who's just a fraction ahead of you is perfect.
Yeah.
If you have church hurt, there is no one spot to fix all, except to know that your church hurt comes from man, not from Christ.
Mm.
Never. It will never come from Christ. If you start to read things in the Bible, you go, hey, tough things. Hey, the Bible does not like women. That's not true. Show me where. And it says, well, Paul says for all the women to shut their mouths in the church. I go, okay, what's the background? What's the historical background of that's going on here? Because that's not really what he said. Again, we have to read in context. What did he really mean when he said that? And then somebody goes, oh, I didn't realize that's what it meant because my ex-church or whatever said this. Yes, I get it. Somebody who was, listen, I've been to some pretty bad doctors in the past who, I said, hey, I have flu-like symptoms, and they're like, no, you're fine, just let it pass. 2 weeks later, I have pneumonia. It doesn't mean that all doctors are bad. It means that one happened to not be a great one. I don't stop going to the doctor. I just stopped going to that one.
Mhm.
So when you have church hurt, yeah, I agree. Don't go back to that church. Don't go back to that pastor. If you don't feel the connection with Christ where you are, go to a different one. When I first accepted Christ, I actually went to a Catholic church, a Lutheran church, a Baptist church. I wanted to see where I'd feel the most comfortable, and I went from there. If you have church hurt, reach out somewhere else that you're going to be able to express how you feel in a really positive way. Listen, one of the reasons we made the Boundless Bible was for that reason. We have 3 of us who are completely different, all pointing to Christ. So when you listen to us talk, none of us have the same story. None of us have the same belief where it started from, but we all end with Christ. And that's that part of it's okay. It's okay to disagree. It's
Yeah.
okay to not know everything. It's okay to be confused by it. Just don't stop.
Mm.
Learn the answer because if you stopped, if the first time you started learning how to walk, you fell down, you don't stop learning how to walk. You just start doing it again and again, and eventually you're up, and then eventually you're running faster. And it's just how much do you want to run? If you want to
Mm.
run with Christ
Mhm.
and the opportunity is there, you just got to keep going.
Yeah, and just be careful. I mean, you got to be. It's discerning. That's why it's really important for you to open up your own Bible, because that's what's happened to so many that I've realized, like that's been homeschooled or that's gone, with a lot. It's because they're born and raised in these situations, and that's what they believe. That's the word of God. Like you said, it's like no, like read it in context, understand it, understand the leader. Like when you go to a new church, like what would be the things that you would look for? Is he opening up the Bible or is he talking about politics?
Yep.
Is he opening up the Bible and pointing to Jesus, or is he like using one verse to say, okay, now give me your money? Like
Yeah.
It's really
Absolutely. And I love movies, but when you go to a movie, are you watching the movie to learn about the history of religion? I hope not. Although a lot of people have taken things and listen, I love it for the entertainment purpose, but the Da Vinci Code theologically is not accurate. But if
hmm
people take it as accuracy,
right.
then you're missing the point of the entertainment part of the movie. It's not to teach you.
hmm
So be aware of where you are. If I'm watching TikTok and I'm trying to get my information on God through TikTok,
Right.
you're not going to be getting it. That's not where your theological,
Yeah.
confidence is going to come from. Are there good things on there? Absolutely. Are there truths on there? Absolutely. But you also have a lot of false, and you don't want to hang your learning and your relationship with God on that.
Right. And not only learning and relationship with God, but therapy.
Oh yeah. Whoa.
TikTok therapy. I'm just like, oh, where did you learn that? Oh, on that 10-second video on TikTok. And I get it. Like the therapists are out there doing, but these are little bite-sized things. And it's just not everybody's looking for that miracle drug or that, and it's just like, no, like it's hard work. We got to learn that we have to be responsible for ourselves, you know? So I want to know.
My wife has anxiety and she's having a moment. And I go, well, just calm down. Oh, thanks. That was helpful. I didn't realize that that's all I needed
You
to do.
didn't get MMA'd?
I definitely would have if I did that. But it's that same thing. It's that one snippet of, oh, I just want her to relax. I'm going to say, just
Yeah.
calm down. There's no way it's going to work. You
No,
need
it
to
doesn't
learn
help.
how to, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. And learn to just that's the thing what I love about being a disciple of Christ. It's pretty easy. It's like love him and love others, right?
Yes.
And learn and be responsible for yourselves and learn to be in community because that's what we're meant to be in
100%.
community in this world. He created it all, and we all have these gifts and talents, and it's like we have to move forward with what we have, good or bad. Good or
Yes.
bad. So, a little bit about the Boundless Bible. I want to know why and how, and who are the other two dudes?
How and why, I have no idea. I have a men's group that there are two gentlemen that go there, Javi and Jason, and become incredible friends of mine. But what we've realized is that we started talking in this Bible study, and they come from different areas of life. Jason is very poetic and abstract, and just a genius. He's brilliant. And Javi is this loving, faithful guy and loves the Lord. And we just started talking and we realized that, man, we really have these different perspectives all leading to the same place. And what we've realized is that all these other guys have been asking us about our journeys and why we feel a certain way. And these conversations just became really fruitful. And then we started having conversations with our wives and with their friends. And we just realized that what we provide is something a little bit different than other podcasts. So other podcasts take a question, here's the answer, this is my perspective, and that's kind of it. We have this discussion where we agree or sometimes disagree, and why we disagree. And it's hopefully hitting people there that go, I never understood that. I don't agree with that. And then somebody says it and they go, oh, I'm on his side. And then the next week they're going, oh, wow, no, that guy is wrong. I'm on this guy's side now. And it's a really great way to just have a conversation about the Lord, but in a way biblically that you can see people can be different and have different opinions, and it doesn't make you wrong.
Right, right. Okay, that's interesting. Are they pastors too?
So they're not. One of them actually went to seminary and left seminary based on a really bad conversation he had with a pastor who, again, that church hurt kind of led him down the wrong direction.
Wow.
And has come back to the Lord, and is just a brilliant man. And his name is Jason. And then Javi, who might as well be one. It's really just at this point, an ordination paper because he has all the knowledge for the Bible. But he's a creative. He's a creative person. He's a videographer. He was an actor in California.
Wow.
Again, a crazy story with him. Absolutely loves the Lord and just has faith the way I believe everybody should have, this childlike faith of just, this is the Lord. I don't need all the answers. I just know that I feel this is the Lord. And then you have me, who has this background of this Jew that turned atheist, that turned scholar. And my point of view is always kind of from the pastoral and academic standpoint.
Okay. And are all three of you in South Florida?
We're all in South Florida.
How did I not know? I guess I did not look. I didn't know that. I thought you were. I don't even know where I thought you guys are.
Dayton,
All right.
Sunrise, and Pembroke Pines. We're all
Oh
here.
wow. Okay, we're all Broward County.
Yes.
That's so cool. All right. So, as we wrap up, you wrote a book called Staying in Faith,
Yes.
right? Would you touch on that a little bit and then just share with the audience anything else you want them to know before we end this episode?
Sure. So I wrote a book. It was my first attempt at writing a book. And what it really wanted to do is I wanted to be a testimony from God to the world. And I wasn't writing for God. It was my expression of what God's testimony was. And that's the Bible. And it is the truth and the facts of the Bible, and it has some apologetics in it, and it has some faith in it. It has some theology and some philosophy, and it really was all the words that just hit me that God was putting on my heart as a testimony to us. And when people go, well, what is the Bible? And most people don't even know what the Bible is. I look at it as, it's not a story about us. It's not a story just about God. It is literally God's testimony of us. These are my people. This is what I've created. This is how I love them. These are all my plans that I had for them to reconcile with me because of the love that I have for them. So it really was just this attempt at me putting that out there. And it was like apologetics. When I got into it, I said, I want to learn about how to defend the faith to other people. And it became a foundation for me. This book was, I want to put this book out and help people who are struggling with their faith to stay in the faith, which is why it's called Staying in the Faith. And what I found is it was this therapeutic book for me to just get this beautiful word from God of what we mean to him and what he put out there in his word for us to find. And it ended up just being the most beautiful thing for me. And it is selfishly a book for me now. If anybody reads it, I hope they get something out of it. But the more I read it, the more I get out things for myself. And I just found that with everything in my walk of life with God is you do it for other reasons. And then God goes, no, I'm going to bless you with that as well. There's this really great song. It's not very well known. It's called Say So. And it's by Russ Moore. And it is this song about how you can bless others by being a blessing yourself. So it's blessing others with your words, giving people a word of, you're doing a great job. I love you. Thank you. Just these wonderful affirmations that we can give to people every day that there are times we wish we could have. And I think that's what I would leave it with is, yes, we're called to love God and love one another, but that's not just a feeling. It's emotion. It's a movement. I need to tell somebody, hey, I really appreciate you. I listened to what you did. Diana, I listened to your podcast before I came on, and I really appreciate you and your perspective. And I love the words that you're giving to people. There are so many people out there struggling, and they just want to be told that they're doing okay. They're on the right track. They will get better. Things will get easier. And that song is all of what God is about, which is just, I love my people. I want them to be okay. I gave them purpose. I gave them life. I breathed it out of me into them, and we're doing okay. And we're loved. And I just want that to be the last thing that people remember is you're loved. And we appreciate you. And I appreciate you, Diane. I really do. I appreciate it. Yeah, just having me on the show and showing your love to people the way that I believe God has called us to.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I try my best to live more in the spirit than the flesh. I try.
I understand.
So, where can people find you if they want to reach out or listen to your podcast or buy your book? I mean, like.
Yep. The boundlessbible.com is the easiest way to find it. The Boundless Bible is on just about every, podcast platform. But if you wanted to look online, you'll find my email there as well. You can get in touch with Jason or Javi. But the boundlessbible.com is the easiest way to get in touch with me. And, I would love it. I love to have conversations with people. I can go on forever. I'm sure from this conversation, we can talk for hours and hours.
About other things too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you can reach me anywhere you want.
Okay. I really appreciate that, David. Listen, eventually I would love to meet all you guys in person, we're in the same county and stuff like that. We'll see. I mean, there's no coincidences at all.
No, I think that'd be great. And I know that the guys would be up to it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And listener, do not forget to please trust in the Lord, guard your heart, and renew your mind. Bye. And now for the disclaimer to make sure you understand that you are responsible for you. The content provided on the Holistic Counselor podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast are my personal opinions and do not represent the views of any professional organizations with which I am affiliated. Call your doctor, 911, or 988 immediately if you have a medical emergency. The Holistic Counselor podcast does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the podcast. Reliance on any information provided by the Holistic Counselor podcast, guests appearing on the podcast at the invitation of the Holistic Counselor podcast, or other listeners to the podcast is solely at your own risk. Confidentiality notice. If you engage with the Holistic Counselor podcast by commenting or posting and are a client, please be aware that you may be revealing information that could compromise your confidentiality. Please remember that disclosing your identity or personal details can be linked to your clinical material. As a therapist, I am bound by confidentiality and will not respond to any disclosures of this type on this podcast. I am committed to upholding the ethics and confidentiality of the therapeutic relationship, which extends to all forms of communication in accordance with the laws and professional guidelines that govern mental health professionals. I want you to know that your privacy is of utmost importance, and you are responsible for protecting it when interacting on this platform or any other public forum. Thank you.